Welcome back to the Spirit, Mind and Soul podcast. Today I'm speaking with Kim, a somatic empowerment and sexuality coach, who talks to me about an assault that took place when she was younger from a family member and how she had to heal from heartbreak and shame after that assault. Kim now teaches others to reconnect with their body. She has a big focus on sex and love and relationships and works with women and men on all of the above. I hope you enjoy the podcast episode. There's lots in here. Kim doesn't hold back, and it's a really interesting, hearing her talking about the family dynamic now after the assault and the amazing work that she's gone on to do. If you do enjoy this podcast episode, please hit the like button, subscribe, you'll be notified when the next episode comes out. Hi Kim. So thank you again so much for agreeing to come on today and tell your story and share your story. I'm so excited to hear more. I know we chatted before, but I know we're going to go pretty deep today. Um, so I know you want to talk about a time when you were assaulted, and I know that you when we spoke, you said you felt very disconnected. So I would love to hear more about that. But if you could tell me first what life was like before. So
Mm.
a bit of context, I'd love to know what life was like for Kim.
Yeah, it's hard to know exactly what life was like because I was 14, right? But
Yeah.
at the same time, I felt safe.
Mm.
I was carefree. I trusted myself. I trusted others. I definitely was very trusting. That's the best word, right? Like, really,
Yeah.
like, I'm safe. I got this kind of thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because I guess you don't see those things coming, and you feel, I guess, safe, and yeah, yeah. I can't imagine. I can't
Yeah.
imagine.
Yeah, and I also felt very comfortable in my body. Like I was like,
Mhm.
hey, this is my body. Sure, it's changing, but I'm like comfortable in it. And I think a lot of what the assault also did, and we can go into more as the post assault, but there was
Mhm.
also this all of a sudden judging myself, criticizing myself, looking at myself in a different lens and
Mhm.
trying to be careful, but that sometimes is too careful. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
It's the doubt. It's the
Yeah.
control. It's the trauma trying to keep you safe, but it's a false sense of security and safety from there.
Mhm. Yeah. So what do you want to tell us then about, obviously what happened, going into
Yeah.
as little or as much detail as you feel comfortable with?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for asking. So, yeah, so I was like at the moment who I am right here, right now. I
Mhm.
am totally embodied, like I am comfortable in my sexuality. I'm turned
Mhm.
on. I'm living from pleasure. I don't hold shame and conditioning around my body and my sexuality. But if we go
Mhm.
all the way back, at 14 and a bit, I woke up in the middle of the night being sexually assaulted by my stepfather. And what this caused, and there's a little bit more to it because there's also a part with my mother and what she played. So it was a horrific night. I was shocked. I was like, what is going on? I hadn't even been with a partner like that before. I hadn't even been kissed yet, right? So it was a lot of betrayal and shock and what just happened. And this man's been my stepfather since I was 6. Like, what's going on? And I didn't know what to do. And I can look back now because of my trauma experience. I'm very, very deeply trauma informed now. And I can look back and see all the trauma responses I went through in the next 4 hours. Like there was so much of, shaking and really like numbing out. This happened, disbelief. I definitely fawned when he was assaulting me. I kept trying to roll over and try to ignore that it was happening and pretended I was sleeping. So I kind of fawned. It's kind of a fawn, it's kind of a flight. I really was really confused through the whole rest of the night. Should I run away? Should I call the police? Should I go to my friend's house? And it was later in the morning that I started to come into a little bit more of a clarity trauma response of no, I'm going to fight, like bullshit. I'm calling this out. And I was like, I know what I'm going to do now. I'm going to tell my mom because then she's the adult. She's going to hold on to this and she can figure this out. So I told my mother after he left for work, probably around 7 in the morning, somewhere in there. And initially she believed me and Then she told me to go to school, which was really confusing to me. I was shocked. Like, I was like, what do you mean? Like, I still was shaking and really distraught. But I was also very much a really good girl up to that point. Like, I listened to my parents. I did what I was told. And that's a whole other story of conditioning we can go into. The good girl roles play so much in here. So I went to school, and then a few hours later, I was picked up from school and told that my mother was outside and she wanted to talk to me from the office. And when I went outside, my mother was there, but actually my stepfather was there too. He was in the roundabout of the school. My mother was standing between us, and she said, "You're going to hop in the front seat and we're going to talk this out, and I'm going to sit in the back seat." And she did. And she sat on the back seat and she never said a word. It was another trauma experience, essentially. That is another traumatizing part. And the betrayal of my mother initially believing me and then never talking of it again. Like, didn't talk about it again till I was confronted her in 2017. And even then, she still, no, it didn't happen. I was like, okay. So that sent me into a really interesting time, right? Through my later teens from there on out. And what I saw, fast forward kind of into later teens, definitely that not trusting myself, right? Into my 20s, not trusting, burnout, overworking, perfectionism, trying to be perfect, basically, so I'll be loved, right? And I know that because we all need this deep, deep safety, love, and belonging. And what that led into, because I was trying to be so perfect, was total, utter disconnection, right? Not trusting body, not trusting my sexuality, not trusting how my body worked, even to give birth, to nurse babies. I held a lot of trauma, especially in my left breast, because that was one of the areas he was assaulting me on. And my body kept giving me symptoms and signals like, are you going to listen? Are you going to listen? I kept getting mastitis in my left breast. Right. But every time, all the way through, like once my mother dismissed that assault that day, I tried to dismiss it. I tried to, like, how do I forget about this? How do I push this down? How do I, nope, didn't happen. Anytime I'd had flashbacks, I'd be like, nope, think about something else. Nope, think about something else. So my body was like speaking to me in so many different ways as I went through my 20s and my 30s, trying, begging to get my attention.
Mm-hmm.
But again, there's so much conditioning around the good girl, around perfectionism, around my own trauma that was really not processed, really not handled, and betrayal that was also not handled and processed. So, yeah, ask me more. I'm happy to answer any questions.
I think that's even just telling your mum so soon the next morning that's so brave, and there must have been a fire in you, and I can see why you've went on to do what you're doing. It's like immediately you've not accepted, you've almost, I don't know, turned that pain into just something, and obviously we'll go into more because you really are doing work to help other people now related to this.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm interested also what the relationship was like with your, immediately after. Obviously, you had that betrayal from your mum that you felt. So, can you tell me more about your relationship before we move on to the work that you're doing now with your mum?
Absolutely. So that turned out to be interesting. Looking back, being a mother of three teens slash adults, I've got 17, 19, and a 22-year-old. So I'm already almost through those ages. I can see that what was labeled at that time was probably a difficult teenager,
Mm-hmm.
even though I still was a really good girl and I really listened to everything. Like, I wasn't one who partied. If they weren't home, I didn't have parties. I didn't stay out till 2 a.m. I didn't do those things. I was still really conditioned to be that good girl. It's interesting. A lot of religion, I think, comes into there too. Even though we weren't overly religious family, there's still conditioning coming in from other family members like grandmother and society or teachers that were and so forth. So there was all this, you better be good or else feeling, right?
Mm-hmm.
So relationship with my mom, I was hurt. Like, I was really, truly confused. I also decided, like, I remember when I confronted my stepfather that day in the car, and I was like, he started right away with going, how could you think this of me? How could you think that I would do such a thing? I was pulling up your covers. How could you think this? Like, it was very much my fault, right? Judging and shaming me for thinking so. And at one point I got enough courage and I said, you know what you did. Like, you know what you did. And the way he leaned over the console at me and pretty loudly, not quite yelling, but pretty loudly said, "No, I did not." There was a look in his eyes where I literally decided right then and there, and I'll never forget this. I'm writing a book right now, and I've already written this in it. It was like I decided right then and there, like, I'm on my own from here on out. So when you ask about the relationship with my mother, I literally decided I was on my own from there on out. I got a job. I started working. I started collecting my own money. I started not hanging out too much with them. I got a job to avoid going to the cottage with them every weekend. I got a job so I could stay home and have some safety with nobody home, because it was a regular thing that every single weekend we went to the cottage. So I did things like that. And it's interesting. I also learned how to do things like that later in life. So remind me if I forget, okay? Because my mother and stepfather still stayed a part of my life. There was a period in there where, for about 6 months, where I couldn't stand my stepfather. Like, I was so mad and so angry. And he knew why, obviously, right? Unspoken, but he knew. And there was some little dirty things that he kept doing to prove a point and to claim his control back, of like, you speak and you're done, kind of thing. There was a lot of money started to be thrown around 5 6 months. A lot of, if you do this, I will pay for your school. If you do this, I will buy you a car. If you do this. So I kind of decided in there as well, fine, like, fine. I will receive what I need to receive to get to where I want to get the hell away from here. Like, what do I need to do to get out? So I did that. And relationship with mom has always been the same, I'd say. Super controlling, super, like, almost afraid of her, right? And which is crazy as a 40-year-old. Even at 40, when I confronted her, I was still kind of afraid. I was afraid of her. I was afraid to say no. I was afraid to set my boundaries. I was afraid to um, make her angry, because I would label her as having very many narcissistic qualities. There's a whole definition of narcissism, and there's a whole pile of qualities. And not everybody is a narcissist, but there's a lot of different qualities on the narcissistic scale that start to check off, right? So I kind of played the game, I guess, is the best way to answer that. But that led into that burnout, right? I had my children in my 20s, all of them. Like, I had the third right at my 30th birthday, like 2 weeks later. So I had all of them in there. And I learned to accept the help when she was giving it. And then when I had enough, I had to, like, push her back, kind of thing, right? So she would come and help, with each of the kids when they were born, kind of thing. And she was very, very pushy in that way. And there were some ways that you couldn't say no to her. So it was a really interesting dynamic.
And do you,
Yeah.
that more recent conversation you had, do you feel that resolved anything for you, or did you
Oh, yeah.
feel, yeah, do you feel
Yeah.
forgiveness?
So it's not a matter of forgiveness. So I don't know that forgiveness, with air quotes on it here, right? For those who are listening to a podcast, I don't believe that that is the same forgiveness that we're talking about in the Bible, or that, we are told just forgive and we will be
Yeah.
happier. I actually think it's a clear setting of boundaries of, hey, like, you're not available in here, and you're not going to be part of my life anymore if you're going to continue to do this way, and setting that boundary. But instead, this forgiveness is actually internal. It is actually forgiveness of myself.
Yeah.
Do I forgive myself? Do I give myself enough permission and compassion and love and approval to do the deep healing work, to do the healing work around the trauma with my stepfather, around the trauma with my body, with the trauma with my sexuality, and then again with my mother, right? So that is more the forgiveness. And a lot of people talk about forgiveness as forgiving the other person. And I call bullshit on that one. I don't know that that is truly true. It is the internal work. And then that other person has to do their work. And then maybe you can come to the table together.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's, so when I say forgiveness, I guess I mean letting go, because like you've
Mm,
touched on already, you hold that in your body.
yes.
And so unless you work through that, and I mean, I guess the only way I would yeah, I would say obviously working through it, addressing it,
Yes.
acknowledging it, and working through it until you can let go. And I guess forgiveness comes
Yes.
into that and is part of that, um, without giving it a label. But do you feel you have now, and you've, like you say, it manifests in your body and you
Yeah.
had then disease because of
Yeah.
that?
It showed up in lower back pain. It showed up in
Mhm.
problems with pregnancies. It showed up with mastitis. It showed up in
Mhm.
adrenal fatigue and thyroid issues. It showed up
Mhm.
in so many places. So the
Mhm.
answer to even that question, that part of forgiveness, yes.
Mhm.
I wouldn't be
Yeah.
doing what I'm doing today without that, because that had to come first
Mhm.
in to embody, to really deeply embody that trauma, to embody all of the trauma and shame that I carry. Like, as women walking around this world today, even if you've never been sexually assaulted, you hold I can't even speak today, systemic trauma in your
Mhm.
body around sexuality, around what it is to be a woman, around your pleasure. So yes, that is what I do with my clients now. And that is what I learned to do first, which is really deep somatic healing and releasing work from body, very much from
Mhm.
body, because the body keeps the score no matter what. Even if our head is like, yeah, we're good now, body, it has to be released at the body level. And if not, we're not going to attain the desires that we do want.
That's what I was going to say. You talk about how your connection to your body is your superpower. So can you tell me more about that?
Yes, absolutely. So when we come home, when we learn how to come home into our body and truly feel the uncomfortable, feel the pain, feel the grief, feel the rage, feel all of the emotions, but also really tune in and learn how to feel the sensations. Like, what am I, like, I could go through, like, what am I noticing right now in my body? I feel a little tightness in my heart space, right? I feel a cramp in my foot because I haven't moved it. We can tap in and see what are the sensations. Ooh, there's a little twirling going on in my solar plexus now. And if I was in a session, like, I can sit and play with these. Like, are these stopping me? Are they excitement? Are they, the fun joys of being on a podcast and sharing story? Like, there's always a little activation too. It's not like it ever leaves us. It just, the point is, are we activated in a traumatizing way? Are we triggering ourselves and throwing ourselves out of the window of tolerance? So, they're always going to be there, but have we integrated them? Are we able to hold them with pleasure, with compassion, with love, and get to a point where they don't activate us? And that's the really, really cool thing. But that can only be done through the body. So when we come home into our body and learn to listen to these signals, to these sensations, to our yeses, to our nos, to all of
Mhm.
these different places that our body is brilliant. We can get a yes, I want to do this, or a nope, not for me, in 2 seconds flat, by learning how to trust and really, really deeply being comfortable in our body. And the
Mhm.
fastest place I have found that to be is through sexuality, because it's the biggest place that we've been disempowered for thousands of years.
Mhm. And you're quite a spiritual person, and obviously you were talking there about, you mentioned one of the chakras. So do you bring that into your work? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm trained in sexuality and tantric sex, in
Mhm.
relationships, and it's all has a tantric background. So it's all going to be using the chakras and the energies and breath and sensation. There's so many modalities
Mhm.
available in what I was trained in. There's about 12 or 15 different ones. So it's playing with Tantra and Taoism and um, Neo and classical Tantra, and playing with um, parts of like interfamily systems and parts work and inner child work, and playing with all of it on the whole. And when you bring it all together, it's
Mhm.
epic. It's really, really epic.
And I'm interested to know the type of women, and I guess men, you work with women and men, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm interested to know the problems that they have and what they come to you for help with. And I guess one of the things that I'm really curious about is, do you find that some women find they're too old to feel sexy and
Mm.
embrace their sexuality?
It's definitely a belief, right? It is definitely a belief that that we hold. The older we are, I think we hold more conditioning around taboo, of how taboo sexuality and our body is.
Mhm.
So it can be a little trickier, I noticed, like with my 20-year-old and his girlfriends and friends, they're like, let's talk. Like, what else can you share? Tell me more, right? The older we get, it's like, should you be talking about that publicly? Like, so there's a little bit of a different, right? And that's with every generation. But I have also seen 60-year-olds, 70-year-olds, and beyond reclaim their power, because this is our power. For a woman, our sacral chakra, our root chakra, like our pelvic bowl is our power center. It's where we create life. And this doesn't have to be babies. This can be your business. This can be your relationship. This can be your volunteer work. Like, this is where we create from. So if we are ignoring our sexuality and ignoring our personal power that is already innately within us,
Mhm.
we're only walking around with about a third of us. We
Yeah.
haven't really embraced our entire being of who we are.
Mhm.
So I have seen all ages reclaim their power and sovereignty over their body. And as per what people might be struggling with, a lot of people are struggling with trauma. They're embarrassed. They hold shame. They're like, oh my gosh, did she just say sex or did she just say pussy? Because I use those words a lot. Pussy in a beautiful way, in an empowering way, in your entire pelvic bowl, not just your vulva and your vagina. Like, the essence of who you are. It's your power
Mhm.
center, right? So there's a lot of shame, there's a lot of trauma, and we're all holding it.
Mhm.
There's a lot of fear for not asking for what we want in the bedroom and out, both. Because if you're not asking for what you want in the bedroom, you're probably not asking for what you want out of the bedroom, right? There's a real big connection to both. A lot of disconnection between body, between sexuality, a lot of feeling numbness. Um, there's a lot of trust, like trust issues. So not doubting, a lot of judgment, a lot of shame, a lot of going through the motions and truly desiring to feel sexy, like really true sexy. And then
Mhm.
there's body love. Like, that's a whole other category that's very attached, but it's also huge, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of people will instead strive for overworking or overworking out or over dieting or overeating or over perfecting, right? There's so many areas that we can choose to focus on to show up as if we are perfect. It's almost like a fake confidence, I used to find it and call it myself if I look back.
Yeah.
But when we come home in our body and learn how to really trust ourselves and be comfortable in our sexuality and in our pleasure,
Mhm.
that's where that deep, deep, deep inner trust comes from.
And what about the heartbreak side? Because I know you work with people around
Mhm.
heartbreak. So how does that come into it? And sexuality and embracing, how I guess how do what modalities do you use to help people through the
Through
heartbreak?
heartbreak. Yeah, that's a good one. And heartbreak comes in many forms, right? It can come from an assault. It can come from
Mm-hmm.
trauma. It can come from a bad relationship.
Mm-hmm.
It can come from a good relationship that ended and you decide there's something wrong with you, right? Your core wound possibly is unworthiness, which is so many women's, it's like so many of that deep, I'm not enough, not worthy enough, not good enough. There's something
Mm-hmm.
wrong with me. And I had a lot of those thoughts as well. So and when it comes to heartbreak, it's really just playing with the same things. Like, what are you feeling? Maybe we're going into sensations. Maybe we're doing inner child work. Maybe we're reparenting. Maybe we're calling in that love and compassion and using that as a resource in our body to work through. We tend to hold the heartbreak, the trauma, the shame, the grief, the rage to ourselves so tight. And we
Mm-hmm.
bottle it up because we've been taught that those things aren't okay. And a lot of it just, it's like slowly, like, oh, and if you picture like a tight bulb, like a rosebud kind of bulb, I was thinking flower bulb. If you picture that, like everything's just so tight. But if we slowly start to like open up petal by petal, that heartbreak heals, right? And it's all connected. It's so connected. So there's so many different tools. I use different modalities like breath work, inner child work, parts work, neo and classical tantra work. There's pleasure practices. There's so much. There's so many tools that I have under my belt now because this is what I use for myself. And I'm constantly learning because I want to help people release this. If we can all release the conditioning, the messages, the trauma, the heartbreak, the shame,
Mhm.
our world would be so much better. So much better. Our relationships would be stronger. We'd be all feeling more confident. We'd be comfortable holding conversations when somebody's crossed our boundary. We'd be open. We wouldn't be hiding. We wouldn't be putting on a show. We wouldn't be showing up in a way to make sure that we fit in. We'd just be ourselves, our true, authentic selves.
Mhm. And you asked me to remind you of something you were going to talk about. Was it the relationship? And I was asking about your mum.
Yeah, so my stepfather and mother were still very, very part of my children's lives in the beginning, right? It was hard to separate that out, and I was so busy pushing everything so far down. So as I said, I got a job to stop going to the cottage and start creating more space for myself.
Mhm.
I had a daughter as my third. I had two boys, and then I had a girl. And as my daughter started to hit like that 3-year-old, when she was like not on my hip all the time, right? I started to pull away more because there was expectations. Like we were expected to be there for Christmas. We were expected to be there for Thanksgiving. And I'm talking expected, like wake up 3 kids under the age of 5 and get to the cottage 2.5 hours away on Christmas Day by 1.
Mm.
Expected, right?
Yeah.
And I couldn't even say no in the beginning. Like it was like, it is so conditioned. It's funny how those relationships can really condition us. So I
Mhm.
started to pull away, and I found another way to start pulling away, which was the boys started entering into rep sports. So we had hockey every weekend. We had tournaments, we had travel, we had baseball, soccer, and hockey actually for the boys. So I started to find ways to pull away to protect my kids, especially to protect my daughter, because I had
Mhm.
a feeling that it would be a girl thing. It was just what I felt. I still don't know truly to this day, but yeah,
Are they still together?
they are.
Mm. And are you an only child?
No, so I have a sister who's 2.5 years younger, and he did some interesting manipulation stuff around her and actually told
Mm.
her a different story when she was about 16, 17 when I went off to university, which was really interesting.
Mm.
And and she believes me because she saw me confront my mom, and she studied psychology. So she's like, I could see something obviously happened. Like when I confronted my mother, I went right back into my trauma. It was really hard. I wasn't ready to do that from a very grounded place. I just was like,
Mm.
I'm doing this. And I still wouldn't not do it another way. It was very powerful to do so. It propelled my
Mm.
healing journey. And then I have a brother who is the only child of my stepfather, who was almost a year old, that I was technically babysitting that night. Yeah. So that one's challenging relationship just because he kind of freaked out when I told him what happened as an adult. I told him around 30. And his biggest hit was, well, what does that make me?
Mm.
I was like, that doesn't make you anything. Like that has nothing to do with you.
Mm.
But again, we're so entwined in our relationships of what's acceptable and what's not, especially in this family dynamic, that he's like, well, if he sexually assaulted you, well, then there's a problem with me. There's something wrong with me too, which is so painful to see and witness, but everybody's got to be on their own journey.
And if your family's still coming together, then, 'cause I imagine there are occasions where you're all coming together, and now you're talking about this publicly, I
Yep.
imagine it's another podcast. How is that?
Yep. So my husband is known since the beginning, way like back in the early 20s. A lot of, there's a mosquito in here. That is crazy. It's like too early for that. My sister, I talked to her slowly about it over the years. Each time she denied it. As of 2017, she's more like listening now, right? Which I
Mm.
still don't know from a trauma perspective. That could be because it's also affected her in a way and she's not ready to deal with it. There's so many reasons why. Again, that's hers to figure out. I still see them and hang out with them. And my friends had kind of known through the years. My children didn't know until those young teenagers when 2017 when I told them all. So then they all reacted a little differently. That was kind of interesting. My middle child was like, "Why didn't you tell us? Like we could have like been more protective of
Mhm.
ourselves, right?" And my oldest was like, oh, that's why you don't let us go to the cottage alone anymore. I'm like, mm-hmm. Like he kind of
Mhm.
identified. I don't see my mother at this time. I asked her on that day in November in 2017 to think about everything I'd said and to reach out and to call me when she was ready to talk. And she never has. I've
Mhm.
since sent gifts and some items to her. And then she cut off the entire family. Like she stopped sending gifts to her grandchildren. She stopped wishing them happy birthday and Christmas and all of these things. And I sent some other messages stating to that, like, wow, I didn't expect this. And hey, if that's what you need to do, whatever. But, again, we're here when she
Yeah.
wants to. But yeah, I haven't seen her. And I
Mhm.
don't know if I ever will. She's a very stubborn woman.
Mhm. And I guess we're all on our own journey. That's still really sad that you're not in touch.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess who knows? But I just think I think you're really brave for speaking out. Well done. Just obviously if that breaks up the relationship between you and your mum, I still think you're doing such an amazing thing, and hopefully giving other people that's listening to you, not just on this, but I know you're speaking, on other platforms, and it might give others that voice and the courage to speak out
Yeah.
as well. So I
Yeah.
think
And
that's
the
amazing.
option of faking it, sucking it up, and just getting along for sake to get along
Mm,
was destroying me. Like it was absolutely killing me. And
mm,
body will keep, showing you why and how.
yeah,
So it
yeah,
gets to a point where it's just not worth it. You are destroying yourself, your
mhm,
soul, your essence, the authenticity. Oh my gosh, your authentic true self, who you are
yeah,
to not, right? So
mhm,
we
yeah,
feel like we don't want to risk anything like that. And I get that. Some of the biggest things I said in the beginning were I didn't want to, the relationship with my sister, I didn't want to lose. That was one of the things I was like so afraid of. But
mhm,
at the same time, I couldn't sacrifice myself for a relationship because
mhm,
that doesn't serve me. It doesn't serve my kids.
yeah.
Yeah.
You're definitely setting an example for them. And what does the future hold then? You mentioned earlier
Mm.
you're writing a book and you've got your podcast, and obviously you've got your clients who you help every day. So
Yeah.
what does the future hold for you then in the work that you're doing?
Mm. Well, you never know exactly what it holds, right? But
What's the
I Yeah, exactly, right? But I am part of a group collection book that's coming out in May, which is so exciting. We're April right
plan?
now. It's coming out soon. Maybe by the time this airs, it'll be out.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
it's called Love Thy Body, Sex, Love, and Relationships. It is a beautiful story, a beautiful collection of stories from 15 other sex, love, and relationship coaches, which is really, really cool.
Mm,
And I share more of my story and tools and ways to help to, reclaim and reconnect back to your body. And yeah, my podcast is Get Your Sexy Back. I'm very common in my theme, like Get Your Sexy Back's my business, it's my website, but I am from
mm,
Canada, so it's .ca. The podcast is Get Your Sexy Back. I'm on about 4 or 5 different podcasts for other people's each month. I
mm,
love sharing my story. My plan is to write another like full book that's me.
mhm,
That is another plan. I'm really passionate about really healing this work, right?
mhm,
So I'm volunteering right now at the local sexual assault center. I want to create a world where we are so comfortable in our sexuality and our bodies, we get to a point that this isn't happening. Like there's so many reasons because of patriarchy shutting down sexuality and body that led to all of this secret hiding taboo assault. Like there's so many places now. There will always be assault to a certain degree, but I do believe that because there's so much taboo, for lack of a better word, around our body and sexuality, that there
mhm,
is this secret, this hiding. People aren't comfortable in their bodies and people's needs aren't being met, right? So
mhm.
things are happening. And
Yeah.
I truly believe that we can really heal this.
Yeah. And obviously you're speaking out and bringing awareness to it as well and breaking that taboo, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because there's so many other I'm going to say humans because there's women, men, non-gender, a whole pile
Mm,
of different people out there
mm,
that don't hold sexual trauma, but their parents do or their grandparents do. And
yeah.
it comes down the line. There's actually studies that our DNA actually gets changed when we experience a traumatic experience. So we're actually changing the DNA, which is coming down the line. And then just the conditioning, right? There's like, oh, did you say sex? Like, is everything supposed to be like, hush, hush, quiet? Did you say that behind closed doors? And it's just a matter of really healing that piece so that we can really be our true selves, because it is the portal to our power.
Yeah. So how can people get in touch with you then if they want to ask questions or consider working with you? How can people get?
Absolutely. I am an open book. You can message me on Facebook. I'm happy to offer a free call, and we can hop on a call and talk and chat. I do that with a lot of people. Sometimes it takes a couple calls, and that's no problem. Like, I'm really, really generous with my time. So on Facebook, personally, Kim Coffin, you can find me there. I also have a private Facebook group for female identifying humans called Get Your Sexy Back. My website has all my information, getyoursexyback.ca. Podcast, Get Your Sexy Back. A lot of the show notes have links where you can contact me as well. So really anywhere. And on Instagram, it's Get Your Sexy Back Coach with underscores in between.
Great. And can I just ask you, Kim, before I let you go, we've been talking a lot about your work and your journey, and I want to know if there's anything personally for you that you're longing for that's just for you.
To serve more, to really serve more. I serve people worldwide right now, but to really have I have a membership, my Sacred Pleasure membership, like to have thousands of women in that membership and to have that community and to really see that healing. I know a lot of people are like, no, but like personally, I'm like, I love what I do. I've done many careers in my time and I love what I do. And that is truly one of my deepest goals.
Amazing. Well, I wish you all the best. Thank you so much for being brave. And I know you've spoke many times, but again, to share your story, I think it's, I really think it will help other people as well, and break that taboo on everything we've just spoke about today. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on.
You're welcome. I hope you enjoyed listening to Kim's story. I think she's really brave, like I said during the interview, really brave for, not holding back, just saying it like it is and sharing her story and being proud to share it. And so she should. And I do urge you to go and check out her podcast and the work that she's doing. If you check the description box below, there is a little something in there for my podcast listeners, so go and check that out. And all links on how to contact Kim are also in the description below. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love it if you could hit the like button, subscribe, you'll be notified when the next episode comes out.